Image and Form Games is a studio name you might not necessarily recognise, but please believe me when I say that their creative output over the years has been nothing short of stunning. They're the makers of the Steamworld series, an anthology of games spanning a score of genres, all housed within this gloriously ornate shared post-apocalyptic steampunk universe. Everyone's a robot. It's got a bit of a Wild West thing going on, that emergent pioneer spirit. Each title packed to the gills with a succession of really bright and colourful characters rendered beautifully and often sat within surprisingly thoughtful stories. These games are great, and I really wanted an excuse to bang the drum for them, to encourage anyone who hasn't already dipped a toe to get stuck into a franchise that I consider to be criminally underrated. From those patient first steps of infancy to their most recent output, let's talk about digging holes, shooting hats off heads, and a surprise bonus game you might not be expecting. Although many folks' relationship with the Steamworld games, myself included, began slightly later on in the canon, chronologically the first title in the series, and the first game developed by Image and Form Games, is Steamworld Tower Defense on the 3DS. It does exactly what it says on the tin. A succession of enemy waves are gunning for you, and it's your job to ensure total and utter discombobulation. A touch of resource management and careful placement of your brave defenders are required for victory, but there are hidden dangers in the mix too. A wayward bullet in the wrong place at the wrong time could spell more disaster than victory for you, a design principle that will resonate throughout the rest of the series. Big dynamite heads, these developers, it seems. I'm not coming to this entry with an established history. I only played this for the first time last year, and only briefly, as I'm not really a fan of this genre. It was more a curiosity about how much evolutionary remnants existed as far back as this inaugural offering. But the game is solid, and you can already see the artistic sensibilities shining through. A simple experience, released as DSiWare to a mixed reception, largely due to its level of difficulty, and bloody hell, even by the third or fourth mission it's really putting you through the ringer. But it's undeniable that you can see the polish and creative groundwork that would go on to define the series moving forward. Steamworld Dig is an inspired mix of the cerebral joy of exploration and discovery and the raw animalistic pleasure of digging. Right out the gate, it's a concept executed incredibly well, with a subterranean world full of secrets and an upgrade system that encourages you to seek out the treasures of the earth. What's remarkable about all this is that despite the brief runtime, around 3 hours start to finish, it really doesn't feel all that slight. The world you explore so cleverly builds the illusion of scale through the careful juxtaposition of claustrophobic caverns and dizzying wide spaces. There's a healthy selection of handsomely rendered biomes to change things up periodically, acting as chapter bookmarks of a sort, and offering up new challenges to ensure that the experience doesn't get stale. It really feels like you're going on a wild adventure, pushing yourself further and further into the earth and into increasingly hostile realms, but with an inspired checkpoint system that gives you a much needed reprieve to return to town, sell your ore, purchase upgrades, and return to where you left off. Not so generous as to trivialize the whole game, the space between these fast travel points is wide enough to give you pause for how you manage your journey, and a single use item that offers up an on-the-spot get-out-of-jail card is a little too cumbersomely expensive to be something to rely on. What this preserves is an experience that I believe to be the truly great thing about Steamworld Dig. That primary means of navigating, digging through the dirt and rock, has this duality to it. You're seeking out ore to strengthen your pick, stoke your lamp, and increase your odds of survival, but you're also forging a path, and this is never more valuable than when you have to make your way back up. The topography of this subterranean journey becomes a living map of not only your travels, but your actions too, those helpful and those less so. This is a way for the player to eke out a small pocket of creativity within an experience that is largely curated, and it allows you to reflect on everything you've done to get where you are in that moment. Dotted periodically throughout also are these instanced challenge rooms that really highlight, independent of all that digging, how well crafted the movement mechanics are here. And while I did find a few areas a little awkward to navigate, especially those springy mushrooms that require a ton of fine-tuning to get your head around, returning to Steamworld Dig for this video, a good decade and change after its original launch, only reminded me of how much this game got right first time. Steamworld Dig was an inarguable success, which is why it came as a bit of a surprise that its follow-up took such a drastically different direction. A turn-based tactics sim in the vein of XCOM, you carry a ragtag crew of interstellar cowboys across the galaxy in pursuit of treasure and justice, facing off against marauders, fascists, and worse. With Steamworld Heist, it's another case of getting it right first time, an experience that simultaneously captures the best strategic elements of the genre, while also offering them in an easily digestible format. A smaller scale that still finds impressive ways to feel big. It has that pick up and play element, instanced short sharp skirmishes that are immediately gratifying and juxtaposed nicely with the bigger, more arduous wars of attrition presented periodically throughout. Coupled with this is a rating system that requires a certain degree of risk, foresight, sharpshooter instinct and tactical prowess to master. If you want the maximum number of stars, you need to make sure that you do all of your optional objectives and get everyone out alive, which is something easier said than done. With the ongoing journey skill gated by a Mario-esque star requirement as much as it is by its nicely escalating difficulty, this encourages the player to replay previous maps to top up this kudos currency, and while some of those earlier fights do get a bit easier with a few levels under your belt and some tasty new hardware, the difficulty curve here is remarkably balanced. Those battles still have bite to them, even for seasoned veterans. Where this game truly holds its head up high, however, is in how its turn-based strategy is married to the need to manually aim your shots, often without any kind of visual aid, giving each action a certain degree of peril, but also a huge amount of satisfaction that comes from really nailing a shot that seemed impossible at first glance. When the planets align and that one bullet pulls you completely out of a tight situation, there's nothing quite like it. In that same capacity, those rudimentary physics apply to your foes also. As a result, you will learn to love the ricochet in one turn and curse its very nature in another, but fair is fair, right? What's great about this setup is that it also allows for this entirely superfluous but incredibly funny metagame of what I like to call millenary Pokemon. A keen aim can allow you to shoot your enemy's hat clean off their head, giving you the chance to collect it and then parade around with it adorning your own bonce. There's no mechanical advantage to be found here, it's merely a proud display of poor sportsmanship and a brilliant way to show off the versatility and precision of those systems. That's what makes Steamworld Heist such a great contained experience though. It really understands the things that make it fun, and it allows its own playfulness to carry it. Of course, the allure of the dirt was too much to pass up for a second go. This here should be the gold standard for the justification of sequels, a consolidation of all the design principles of that flagship entry, broadened, tightened and divested into a more complete feeling, varied and engaging offering. Steamworld Dig 2 is more than just a continuation of that original game, even if narratively it is a direct sequel. Its world feels expansive and diverse in ways that support that well-regarded core gameplay loop rather than casting shade over it, gifting you with enough breadcrumbs to make you take stock of your cumulative toolkit, finding inventive ways to seek out the upgrades dotted along the journey, which in turn allow you to return to previous areas and explore further. Where the first entry largely had you making your way down, and for the most part this is true also for the sequel, there are more orthogonal options available to you, which to me feels like a nice reprieve from the tension and pressure of pushing yourself ever downwards, taking a breather to expand your understanding of the world outwards too, even if give it sometimes a much briefer journey as compared to the Golden Path. The game's experience system has been adjusted to encourage tackling those fearsome beasts along the way, the ones that you would previously avoid in the first game. Steamworld Dig 2 giving you more verbs to play around with to encourage this broader understanding of what its mechanics can offer. It has more boss fights compared to the original's solitary final encounter, and long-time viewers of this channel know how I feel about that, but these scuffles are honestly pretty decent. A real understanding of how to use every part of the buffalo to create something that is a challenge, but not one that requires a complete rewiring of your brain in order to comprehend. This might actually be the best search action game. Please don't tell the Hollow Knight fans. Dig 2 is a real treat of a game. Generous without being overbearing, inventively different while retaining enough familiarity to entice fans of the original back, a greater emphasis on storytelling without it getting in the way of the gameplay, a few incidental changes that bolster the weaker elements of that principal offering. Also, without spoiling too much, the game chooses to throw a couple of wildcards in the mix partway through with a genuinely surprising and quite horrifying sequence that I still have nightmares about to this day. It's a lot of fun, and everything you could want from a sequel. I'm kind of gutted that we probably won't see a third entry to provide even more of this exploratory, diggy goodness. But I think in replaying this and its predecessor in tandem for this video, it's reminded me that there is new joy to be found in familiar things. What was that old saying? Something about a baby and bathwater? Not content with trying their hand at search action and turn-based tactics, now we have a deck builder in the mix, and a pretty good one at that. It's not quite as expansive and experimental as Megacrit's genre dominator, Slay the Spire. In fact, I would probably recommend not playing the two around the same time because the comparisons would not do this entry any favours, but still I found Steamworld Quest to be an incredibly rounded and malleable adventure that once again is a drastic alteration of form from what came before, and yet retains some of that connective tissue in the translation. In this card-collecting RPG, you carry a party of adventurers across a fantasy kingdom in pursuit of a corruptive force that has laid waste to your village. It's a twofold game, exploration and combat, streamlined without compromising the vision. It has you navigating a beautifully realised 2.5D environment with scores of hidden secrets to uncover between bouts of burly brawls. Those battles will seem very familiar to fans of the genre, a hearty mix of attack, defense, restoration, and doling out status effects on either party in the conflict. But there's some unique touches to be found within also. Abilities are represented by punch cards, colour-coded to identify which character they relate to, and while each party member represents a fairly standard RPG archetype, there is a surprising amount of wiggle room to be found within. Everyone can deal out damage, but they have their own unique approaches to leveling the playing field when it comes to those more fearsome encounters. There's an interesting bit of friction to be found here also. Steamworld Quest's combat system is a tug-of-war between critical need and optimization, in part due to a combo system that rewards selecting a succession of cards from the same character. Doing so unleashes a bonus combo final ability that cannot be picked otherwise. Not all cards can be played right away, however, with the more potent skills locked behind a tidal currency of cogs that accrue and are spent according to your choices each round. It's simplified in a certain regard, in that the order in which you play your hand isn't quite so transformative as it is in Slay the Spire, but there are still decisions to be made each turn, and to me it feels like a great middle ground between classic RPG combat fare and those more granular, nerdy systems found in contemporary deck builders. Steamworld Quest is an immediately satisfying version of this sort of game. Like its forebears, it presents itself in bite-sized chunks, each chapter offering up a manageable selection of fights and secrets. In closing remarks, offering a tantalizing breadcrumb trail of a percentage score for how much of its hidden treasure you actually found. You might think you've combed everything, but you probably haven't. On top of this, its combat and deck customization carries it really well. There's a nice slow drip of new characters, abilities, equipment, and encounters to steadily guide you through the dozen or so hours it takes to reach the conclusion of this adventure. While I will admit returning to this after recently spending dozens of hours in Slay the Spire 2 has dampened my appreciation of the systems at play here, and the story is very standard fantasy adventure fare, I still really like this game. The character design and playfulness of the incidental dialogue, coupled with just how nice it looks and how immediately satisfying its combat is, gives me no pause whatsoever to recommend this as a good use of your time. So listen, even if you've never played any of these games, it's quite obvious that this next entry is not a Steamworld game. It is, however, an image and form creative work, one that marks a wonderful deviation from the formula into the realms of 3D, and, if you squint hard enough, holds many of the same design principles that those previous titles have been building on, and as such I feel like it deserves a spot in this video. Dropped unceremoniously onto a verdant alien planet, two down-on-their-luck space truckers set out to explore a space seemingly plagued by the titular Gunk, an amorphous mass of dark purple pustules. It corrupts the environment and creates ongoing hazards to you that only cease once you've vacuumed it all up. Placed firmly in the shoes of the impulsive but kind-hearted Rani, your task throughout this adventure is to do just that, in the process gathering materials to bolster your abilities, unlocking paths, discovering the secrets that reach into the dark heart of this planet's problems, and trying not to give your partner in crime Bex an aneurysm in the process. The act of hoovering up this gunk alone is wonderfully satisfying in that same way that all the Steamworld games' fundamentals are. A fluid, goopy mass evaporates to give way to a burst of colour and plant life ripe for the picking, but the game doesn't simply rest on this one core verb. Like every other Image and Form title, the gunk wears many hats. It's a little bit Metroid Prime, what with this scanning the environment and enemies to learn more and unlock new upgrade schematics. It's a little bit puzzle platformer, wonderfully ornate lock and key mechanisms, almost alchemical in nature, transforming the environment to present the way forward. Branching paths reward exploration, but also give these spaces a greater sense of place and expansion, even when there is a direct and singular path forward. You never get lost, but the guiding hand of the developer here is remarkably hidden. For their first proper venture into fully 3D environments, this is an incredibly impressive effort. I feel like you could slap a Double Fine logo at the front of this and no one would know the difference, and I mean that with high reverence. The Gunk is a well-paced, really compelling little adventure, solid foundational mechanics bolstered by a truly great cast. The dramatic tension that builds between the two leads is really good. Their personalities, priorities, and how this shapes both the story and the way the game unfurls is top-tier narrative design. Like everything else that came before it, there is an intrinsic playfulness to the whole endeavour that makes it an absolute joy to engage with. While it doesn't look much like a Steamworld game, I would say it certainly feels like one. You can see the connective tissue there, building upon core principles while letting the studio's artists really thrive in that space. I think this is an absolutely dynamite game. This one's a bit of a dark horse for the series. Steamworld Build is the first entry to release after Image and Form's consolidation under the wider banner of Thunderful Games. It was made by a different studio, The Station, known for collaborating on projects like Little Big Planet, and I'm not sure if knowing that going into this has influenced just how different a game this feels to me. It's quite conventional as a city builder. You gather resources, plonk down buildings, turn a few dials here and there and watch the numbers go up. Yes, it's all wrapped up in that nice stylized look. This honestly is a really good looking game, but it is a frustrating entry, mostly for how bogged down it gets in genre staples. The balance of space and resource management is ever so slightly askew, meaning that I found myself having to remove and replace parts of my town with a fair amount of regularity in order to maintain some reasonable sense of progress. It's a game that prioritizes those numbers over the aesthetic, and that's a little bit annoying, especially for a series that is so addictive adept at presenting itself gorgeously and coherently. If it was just this experience over and over, I'd have every mind to chalk this up to a loss and to move on with my life. However, what I find particularly irksome is that in wholesome Steamworld fashion, there's more than meets the eye here. The town building element is fine and dandy. I've made peace with that part of the game, but within that lies a subterranean adventure. Yes, there is an excavation element to this city builder, wherein lies the true objective of Steamworld Build, a goal that ties the game back into the wider narrative of the series. This is something I think is a really clever twist on the formula that allows it to have that immediate satisfaction of building a rapidly expanding community, while also escaping the diminishing returns of having that be the only gameplay loop. Your goals under the earth directly mirror those above ground, and so you get this interesting back and forth dynamic in the gameplay that, sadly, I don't think quite hits the mark as well as it should. I would go as far as to say that this is probably the weakest entry in this franchise. However, as with tower defense, I am also not particularly a fan of this genre, and I think that has weight to my feelings on it. It will have its fans, and perhaps those more knowledgeable about these kinds of games will be able to chime in as to whether this is a good one of those, but for something that, like all its brethren, is frequently on sale and certainly inexpensive at full price, if you're curious, it's definitely worth a look. After somewhat bouncing off their previous game, I had my concerns about Thunderful's direction for the Steamworld franchise. Was this the beginning of the end, or simply an experimental blip in the system? With the knowledge that they were returning with an expansive sequel to a truly beloved entry, Steamworld's very own XCOM 2, I was nervous. Especially given the fact that I did not like the direction that the actual XCOM 2 took. Turns out I didn't need to be worried, because Steamworld Heist 2 is a great addition to the canon. I'll admit I still went into that game with one particular question in mind. Given my documented belief that bigger isn't always better, does the contained brilliance of Steamworld Heist suffer when expanded upon with a more free-form world to explore? The answer being, not really. In fact, I was genuinely pleased to discover that this strategy sequel's approach to expanding on the groundwork of its predecessor fully recognised what was great about it and used that to craft a narratively more ambitious take on the same formula, rather than just loading in superfluous mechanical extras. Offering up the same gratifyingly tactical fights, sharp gunplay and a tightly honed pace, with a few neat extra bells and whistles and a cute secondary game mode that thankfully doesn't get in the way, the world feels bigger despite being landlocked compared to its predecessor's starfaring journey, partially due to the fact that you can freely move about between missions. Exploration of this space offering its fair share of rewards and hazards, secret caches of resources found while dodging missiles and taking down enemy ships in immediately gratifying naval warfare. The mechanics of the ship are a little basic, and they do get repetitive over time, even with the customization options available to you. Certainly at a point I was wondering what a nice fast travel option would do to my enjoyment of this part of the game, but it is inoffensive at worst, and generally provides quite a nice palate cleanser in between the instanced quests, which are, as before, the focus of the endeavour. Mission design has expanded in ways that celebrate the core function of the game, where a greater variety of enemy types and some fiendish environmental hazards play a crucial role in keeping this feeling fresh. One element I don't quite get, which is something lifted wholesale from the XCOM franchise, is that each member of your party is limited to one mission per day, which, given the number of characters you have access to even in the late game, gives you only a scant few options before having to sail back to the local watering hole to recuperate. I don't really see what this brings to the table, especially given the fact that the number of days you spend in-game doesn't directly relate to any ongoing pressures in the way it does in Firaxis' flagship series. But it is tolerable, much like the secondary bounty currency that gives you an extra incentive to meet your optional objectives in fights, to be exchanged for little of crucial worth, but a nice added boost to your coffers nonetheless. Because the core gameplay systems are so fun to tool around with, these other elements that might have been an irritation in a less tightly honed experience kind of fall by the wayside instead. It's a game full of charm and wit. There's these great little touches found throughout, like a whole faction of enemies who, because of this world's encroaching rust problem due to a deficit of fresh water and a hyperfascistic military hoarding what little remains, have replaced their metal parts with the bones of old sailors dredged from the oceanic floor. Not only does that make for incredibly sick enemy design, but they also use it to conjure up some more mystical properties within these fights, such as totems and necromancy. It doesn't really make much sense, but then again, given the cartoonish nature of the franchise as a whole, who really cares? Like Dig 2 before it, this is a prime example of what you can do and should do with a sequel. The output of a creative team who really knew what had been made the first time around and, more importantly, knew not to rock the boat too much. The future of Image and Form, now embraced under the umbrella publishing wing of Thunderful Games, is uncertain. In late 2024, Thunderful announced that they were putting the upcoming and quite ambitious-sounding Steamworld Headhunter on hold, as well as cancelling many other projects and laying off close to 100 employees as part of a restructuring project that shifted the priorities from development to publishing. I have my thoughts on that. I know the money side of things is hardly my remit as someone largely focused on the artistic merit of things, but I do want people to be paid and to have some form of sustainability in their lives, and honestly, I don't know what the future holds for the people who made these games that I love. Thunderful's publishing output has been decent, with well-regarded titles like Lost in Random, Planet of Lana, and the excellent mind-bending puzzle game Viewfinder launching in recent years, but a part of me quietly hopes that one day they will go back to simpler times, to being a studio making cool games about funky robots, a future of steam and not just hot air.